We live in a unique era where two doors are open in front of us. One leads to our extinction, while the other one leads to a potential future full of fantastic opportunities. Today, we would like to present to you a hypothesis that can become a foundation for such a future. Our survival and the prospects of humanity, including even manipulation of matter, depend on its implementation.
To solve this task, we have an understanding of the overall picture, but there are many unexplored islands in it.
In order to explore these unknown islands of science and build a unified theory capable of saving humanity in the shortest possible time, the scientific potential of our planet needs to be unified. Today, humanity possesses only 6 types of energy, but thanks to the new hypothesis, we can gain access to 32 types of energy. In order to simplify the understanding of the fundamental processes of the world's structure, this hypothesis is presented in the form of animation with associative examples.
For intelligent people, it includes everything they need to make breakthrough scientific discoveries.
Our team of volunteers received this knowledge, and we have only slightly elaborated on it and found historical evidence to support it. We understand that this knowledge carries immense value and consider it our duty to share it openly with the entire scientific community.
We believe that none of us should claim the laurels of victory.
After all, no individuals may be considered winners since a huge team from around the world worked on this hypothesis. Starting a new world requires honesty. Deserved recognition should be given to those scientists who will be able to explain, thanks to this hypothesis, what electricity is, how many types of it exist, what radiation is, what the electromagnetic field is, and most importantly, recognition should be given to those who will be able to find a way out of the climate crisis. For us, that's the most important task because it's a chance to save all of humanity. Now, we'll present you a hypothesis which offers a totally different view of how our world is arranged. This hypothesis gives us keys to manipulating matter and developing such technologies that will enable humanity to take a step into a new era of evolution. It's a future where we will have everything, even the things we haven't dreamed of. How did this hypothesis originate? Some time ago, we were given unique information about how our world is actually arranged. It was confirmed by rather interesting historical artifacts. In order to understand it more deeply, we decided to collect all existing mentions of this information throughout human history. We asked volunteers around the world to start searching, and they found a large amount of artifacts, legends, and stories, which preserve mentions about the true fabric of our world. Along with that, a lot of indications were found pointing towards the veracity of the use of such legendary technology as the Eye of God and Vajra in ancient times. And it turns out that the principle of its operation is directly related to the knowledge of how our world is arranged. We became very intrigued by this information. Since it was impossible to study it using standard methods, we were offered to conduct a number of special experiments and to build for that purpose a unique device that would have a pyramidal shape and certain characteristics. We developed a prototype of such a device in 2016. It is made of aluminum and contains 11 tori. We conducted a series of experiments with this device using certain programs. Some of them were publicly demonstrated. The purpose of those experiments was to verify the possibility of transmitting information to a large number of people, regardless of distance, by means of thoughts. The operator, an experienced person, transmitted information remotely, a symbol or a number, while being inside the pyramid. Meanwhile, participants of the experiment, who were in various countries of the world, received this information through their thoughts. They sent their answers with a symbol and a number they received to an email address that had been given before the experiment. It's important to point out that the symbol which the operator transmitted was picked randomly during the experiment. Nobody knew what exactly was going to be transmitted. All the experiments were conducted exclusively in the presence of a dedicated committee of volunteers, and the whole process was recorded. Thousands of people all around the world took part in the experiment. The result of this experiment shocked us. Why? We were struck by the fact that 70 to 80% of the answers were accurate. This means that people actually perceive the symbol transmitted by the operator. And this cannot be explained by the theory of probability, because the percentage of correct answers was too high to consider it a mere coincidence. Yet, there was another thing that struck us the most. We received a huge number of responses from the participants before the experiment had been conducted, and most of the answers sent in advance were accurate. We asked how this was possible, if at that moment of time, even the operator himself didn't know what sign they would be transmitting. In response, we received an offer to conduct another experiment. It is necessary to understand that the range of Tori settings in the pyramid is very large, and we were told the exact settings of the Tori at which a certain unique phenomenon was detected. The operator noted that literally after several minutes of being in the pyramid device, he began to see various people as well as their whereabouts. Here is how it was happening. At first, he saw numerous white dots, similar to white noise on a TV screen. As soon as he focused on any of those dots, it came closer and a person appeared in front of him. It could be someone the operator knew or someone he didn't know. At the same time, the operator had a clear understanding of where exactly this person was at that moment. This effect was observed by all operators with such settings of the pyramid. In order to study this phenomenon, we conducted another experiment. Volunteers from various parts of our planet took part in it. Some of them were intentionally driving during the experiment in order to change their geolocation. Each volunteer who participated was assigned a number. Before entering the pyramid device, the operator of the experiment looked through the photos of those people and their numbers. The operator knew some of them indirectly, seeing some of them previously on videos. Some other people were known to him personally, while others were totally unfamiliar to him. After the operator entered the pyramid, the head of the experiment announced the numbers of the participants. Then, the operator recalled the person's face, and among a multitude of white dots, the corresponding dot approached, and the operator began to clearly see the person whose face he had remembered. He saw exactly and in detail the location of that person at that moment, and he voiced this information out loud. Then the head of the experiment immediately called that person on the phone and clarified where he or she was at that moment. The results were astonishing. The exact location of the person was determined correctly in 100% of cases. We became very interested. How did such abilities appear in the person who was in the pyramid device functioning at certain settings? We conducted the experiment in Ukraine, while the operator was able to clearly see and determine the location of people even on the other side of the globe. And in further experiments, the operator was even able to feel what the person was feeling at that moment, whether it was taste, smell, heat, or cold. After all, this is actually an immediate transmission of information at enormous distances. How is this possible? During our further research, we realized that it was not all that simple. It turns out that besides the known radiations, thermal, electromagnetic, X-ray, and others, the human brain is able to generate, transmit, and perceive another, completely different type of radiation. These are special waves unexplored by science. The work of neurons of the human brain is unique and inimitable, just like a fingerprint or retina. The neuronal imprint of the brain is unique to every individual. It cannot be confused with any other imprint. It is possible, under certain conditions, to register the specific radiation coming from neurons of the human brain, and as it turns out, it's impossible to shield the signal. With each subsequent experiment, we were amazed at the immensity of horizons and unexplored prospects opening before us. One of the most fascinating facts, which was also established thanks to the pyramid device, is the possibility of increasing a person's internal energy, as a result of which we observed an increase in static electricity. This experiment was also conducted publicly, recorded on a video camera. and this video is available to general public. During this experiment, a person stayed inside a pyramid device with specific Tori settings for a certain period of time. Then, after leaving the device, he touched a glass of an aquarium with his hands. The aquarium was filled with water, and there were 2 electrodes inside, which were connected to a voltmeter. The moment the operator's hands touched the aquarium, the voltmeter clearly indicated an increase in voltage. From the point of view of modern physics, this is impossible, but dozens of people saw that, and it was recorded on a camera. This experiment has been repeated many times, but here it should be noted that not all people could show such a result. We came to the conclusion that personal qualities of the operator can affect the results. The person touched a glass, which is an electrical insulator. The electrodes of the voltmeter were confined in water, and yet we all observed the result. The laws of physics also say that the human body is not capable of accumulating electricity in such quantities. But what we have recorded is a fact. We were offered a hypothesis that fully explains all this phenomena. We invite you to take a look at several artifacts that our volunteers have found. These are the best known and simplest examples. As you can see, this clearly illustrates the discreteness of our world and what the world is made of beyond the quantum level. Nothing special. Well, it's nothing special until you know the details. So now, let's go through it in order. What is our hypothesis of the world's structure? Modern science knows that all substances consist of molecules and atoms. Atomic nuclei are formed from protons and neutrons, which consist of quarks. It is generally believed that quarks are the smallest particles, along with leptons, electrons, and neutrinos, and they are structureless. Our hypothesis says that leptons and quarks have a structure. They consist of certain energies, waves. According to our hypothesis, a lepton and a quark represent coil state of a short elastic waves. What is it? Associatively, it can be compared to a tangle of snakes intertwined with each other. Each tangle is the smallest particle, a quark or a lepton, while each snake in a tangle represents a different kind of energy. When the snakes are in a coil state, we observe a particle. When under certain conditions, a tangle becomes untangled and the snakes line up linearly one after another, we observe a wave, that is, a wave state of the same particle. This is clearly demonstrated by the double-celled experiment, in which a wave passed into a particle state when the conditions changed, in the presence of an observer. In essence, the intertwined tangle represents the quantum level, the level of particle manifestation, while short elastic waves, the snakes that make up everything, represent the beyond quantum level. What processes take place at the beyond quantum level? We know that already at the quantum level, the laws of classical physics stop working. But at the beyond quantum level, everything is radically different. The entire beyond quantum world is filled with short elastic waves, snakes, that is, different kinds of energies. When snakes are woven into a tangle, the invisible becomes visible. This is a process of the quantum world. Each such tangle is nothing but that very elementary particle of the material world. In the beyond quantum world, there are lots of kinds of energies, that is, snakes. Associatively, you can imagine that they have different patterns, colors, and thicknesses. Some are poisonous, some are not. Combinations of these energies, meaning short, elastic waves, or snakes, make up all the waves known to science today: electromagnetic, thermal, and so on. In other words, any wave is discrete in its true nature because it consists of a multitude of short elastic waves, snakes. None of the snakes ever disappear. They just transform from one state to another. Also, all material objects consist of tangles of snakes as the smallest material particles. Each snake in a tangle is a carrier of certain information, a code. Depending on the combination of snakes in a particle, one or another matter with given properties is formed in the material world. Characteristics of a material object and all processes occurring in it are formed at the beyond quantum level. That is, the information embedded in a particle at the beyond quantum level determines what this particle creates. A soccer ball or a dog. If we decompose a snake tangle into a linear state, all the snakes will line up in a strict sequence. And this sequence is very important. Just like in DNA, every fragment is in its place. The first snake in the sequence has a specific role. It is a carrier of information about the whole tangle and carries the main code of the program. Understanding how the world is arranged at the beyond quantum level and that everything is made up of short, elastic waves has led us to an obvious fact that there are many more types of energy in the world than is commonly believed nowadays. Modern physics identifies only 6 types, while we have come to the conclusion that there are at least 32 of them. Interestingly, this is also supported by historical facts. Our volunteers found references to the use of at least 32 types of energy in the ancient times. As paradoxical as it may sound, all this information, which is new to us, was known in ancient times, and many artifacts from around the world prove this. Let's have a look at some of them. Do you now understand what special meaning they carry? Snakes and snake tangles were not coincidental depictions. They were an associative example to explain the structure of matter at the beyond quantum level, as well as the ways to manipulate it. We will talk about that too, but a little bit later. To date, this knowledge has been mostly lost, and that's a shame, because it will be of a great use to modern scientists who for decades have been struggling with questions which can be easily explained by means of this hypothesis. As an example, let's take the Large Hadron Collider, the most powerful particle accelerator in the world. What happens there? In order to study processes in the microworld, scientists use electromagnetic fields to accelerate 2 beams of charged particles, such as protons, at enormous speeds in the collider, and then they collide them. As a result, after the collision, scientists observe the formation and dispersion of much larger particles with a much greater total mass than they had before the collision, and science cannot explain this phenomenon. It is as if 2 tennis balls collided with each other, and their collision would produce a bunch of scattering basketballs. How can this be possible? It's very simple. All these particles are nothing but snakes in the coil state. The energy that accelerates them, the electromagnetic wave, is also snake-like, only not in the coil state, but in the linear one, in the state of a wave. Thus, not only 2 particles collide in the collider, but billions and billions of snakes in the state of waves, which are transformed into coil state during the collision. These coil states are precisely what we capture as a bunch of scattering particles. Thus, the hypothesis gives an answer to how 2 small particles can form new ones that surpass them in volume, size, and mass. In our regular logic, it seems impossible that something larger could emerge from something smaller. It is like Jesus Christ feeding over 4,000 people with just 7 loaves of bread and a few fish, and there were even some leftovers. He made more out of less to us. It is perceived as a miracle. But our hypothesis explains exactly how this happens at the quantum and beyond quantum levels. The mysterious birth of virtual particles in the physical vacuum can be explained in a similar way. How does a particle-antiparticle pair emerge from emptiness and after a short time disappear again? The answer is simple. The short elastic waves, snakes, that fill the vacuum simply move from the beyond quantum level into the quantum world, forming coiled states, the very particles we can observe. In fact, the whole world is made up of snakes. There's no place where they do not exist. As it is said, There isn't a single place in the entire universe where the thinnest needle doesn't run into something. Let's take another example. In quantum physics, there is a phenomenon known as entangled particles. Two particles can be at different edges of the universe and interact with each other without loss of time. A change in the state of one particle instantly causes a change in the state of the other. How is this possible when modern physics says there is nothing faster than the speed of light? It's a question that has led modern science into a dead end. Scientists have no answer. In fact, the answer is simple. At the beyond quantum level, all these particles are located next to each other and connected by a single snake. There's no concept of distance, speed, or time in the beyond quantum world. Completely different laws work there. For example, in the material world, one of the interconnected particles can be in our hands, while the other one can be in a grain of sand on the shore of the ocean in another galaxy. Meanwhile, at the beyond quantum level, both of these particles are at a distance of a single snake, and there's no time or space between them. There can be many more than two of these entangled particles, and all of them are instantly exchanging a huge amount of information among each other. In other words, matter in the universe is constantly interacting. Another phenomenon, the nature of which our hypothesis explains, is electricity. Today, we all use electricity. We know that there is direct and alternating current, that there are electromagnetic waves and static electricity. But what electricity is in its essence, modern science cannot explain. For example, let's take static electricity. Each of us experiences it in everyday life when brushing our hair. Both hair and a comb are dielectrics. When we run a comb through our hair, we untangle some snake tangles and create new ones, thus releasing snakes. The snake tangles on the comb interlace with the ones in the hair. In this way, joint snakes are formed. This quantum manifestation is precisely electromagnetism, which attracts hair to the comb. By understanding these processes, even at such an elementary level, we can already provide answers to many riddles of modern science. For example, let's take an electrostatic machine. There is a paradox associated with it, which is an unsolvable riddle. When the disks of an electrostatic machine are rotated, a powerful spark between the two electrodes occurs only when there are metal spheres attached to their ends. If these spheres are removed, there will be no spark between the electrodes, or it will be barely noticeable. But if, for comparison, a device that works from a battery or a household outlet is connected to the electrodes of an electrostatic machine, an equally strong spark appears both with and without the spheres. This indicates that the electric current generated by the electrostatic machine is not capable of causing a powerful discharge without the spheres, and that the current from the battery is capable of causing the same discharge with and without the spheres. What is the difference between these two currents? The difference is that these are different kinds of electricity, and they differ not just in their external characteristics, they differ at the beyond quantum level. And our hypothesis gives an in-depth justification for the nature of electricity and its different kinds. Doesn't that remind you of anything? It's a good example for thinking people. Thanks to the hypothesis of a coil state of short waves, we understand that electricity is the same snakes in the coiled or linear state. There are many kinds of electricity. They're determined by the predominance of one or another type of snakes in their linear sequence. For example, when you comb your hair, static electricity is generated, which is represented by a certain predominant type of snakes. When magnets rotate, it's another type. In household outlets, alternating current is a third type of snakes. In batteries, the energy of chemical reactions is the fourth type. In an electrostatic machine, it is a fifth, and so on. And note that all types of electricity, just like the magnetic field, have the same first snake in the linear state, which carries a major part of information. We reserve the right to explain the understanding of how electricity works to those who will further investigate this issue. We have merely given an association and invite those who wish to understand the subject to investigate it on their own. Now, let's look from the perspective of the beyond quantum world at what's going on in an electrostatic machine when different kinds of electricity are used. As the disks of the electrostatic machine rotate, the brushes rub against their surfaces. As a result of the friction process, the snake tangles become untangled and form an electrostatic field. Some of the snakes start moving along the conductor as if along a riverbed, forming a directed movement of snakes along the electrodes. As long as there is static electricity, there are no tangles, just a flow of snakes. And in order for a discharge to appear, that is, for the snakes to interact, we need to create conditions where they can gather in tangles again, such such conditions are created by the shape of a sphere. By flowing around a sphere at the ends of the electrodes, the snake coils up on themselves, which contributes to the formation of tangles. In the space around the metal spheres, the snakes and tangles begin to accumulate. The snakes from tangles on one side begin to cling to tangles on the other side, and their massive collision occurs. As a result, the tangles become untangled and the snakes are released. This is the discharge that we observe. We see a spark, waves are emitted in the optical range, and we hear a sharp click, a sound shock wave. All of these manifestations arise as a result of interaction among the snakes. They simply transition from one state into another. Accordingly, when there are no metal spheres on the electrostatic machine, the snakes flowing along the electrodes cannot form any tangles, so they simply fly by without any interaction with each other. But in batteries and household outlets, there is a different kind of electricity. There, tangles move together with snakes in a linear state, and they interact with each other instantly. The tangle state is disrupted, and we observe a discharge and the accompanying phenomena. Therefore, this type of electricity does not need metal spheres to form tangles because it actually flows in the form of tangles. Thus, we understand that the shape of a sphere creates the necessary conditions for transformation of the linear state of snakes into a coil state. That is, in fact, the shape of a sphere or a dome creates conditions for accumulating energy. Doesn't this remind you of anything? If you have noticed the similarity with the domes of religious buildings, you are not mistaken. Ancient legends say that the first dome temples were built more than 24,000 years ago by the representatives of an extraterrestrial race known as the Apexians. They also created the first religion and the first dome-shaped structures for the purpose of collecting energy from humans, which is known as Vril. People gathered in those temples and prayed to the Apexians as gods. This was a process similar to what we have seen in the spheres of the electrostatic machine, where static electricity accumulated. In the temples, people's energy, Vril, flowed through the building into the domes, accumulated there, transformed into a coil state, and was transmitted to the Apexians. The Apexians built structures of various forms in order to collect energy. Those could be pyramidal structures, or towers with pyramidal or dome tops, ending with a pyramidal spire. Many such ancient structures are considered to be places of power. The paradox is that those were places where power was taken away, not given. It is also quite interesting that to this day, such shapes of structures are mainly used for places where mass gathering of people, decision-making, and emotional outbursts take place. If you wanted to tell the story you just heard as a comic strip, how would you draw it? We will show you an ancient artifact that depicts this process as a comic strip. We see a temple structure with a portal above it, and a flying saucer at the top indicates that it is extraterrestrial. In those times, people couldn't know such technologies. On the left, we can see people and an indication that they're giving away their energy. This is shown in the form of snakes flying away. On the right, we see two planets and below them representatives of an extraterrestrial race, the Apexians, who receive energy from humans. And it is clearly shown that humans fed not only the Apexians, but representatives of other extraterrestrial races as well. To this day, through our temples, we feed unknown creatures in the universe. If any of you doubts that we still worship them to this day, you shouldn't. What is unknown to us is not unknown to the priests, and this information has nothing to do with any religious feelings or emotions. This information is about the physics of processes. Thus, our hypothesis opens a new approach not only to physics, but also to the history of our humankind, and reveals certain cause and effect relations of the processes taking place in society nowadays. Radiation. The second riddle of the electrostatic machine is the radiation background that is recorded near its brushes during operation. Where does the radiation come from? After all, there are no obvious conditions for its occurrence. We can explain it easily with the help of our hypothesis. The brushes rub against the disc during the operation of the electrostatic machine. The process of rubbing is a collision of a huge number of snake tangles with each other, which leads to their untangling. As a consequence, various types of snakes are released, including poisonous ones capable of biting and destroying other tangles. These are exactly the radiation snakes that form the radiation background. This background is local and short-lived, During the operation of the electrostatic machine, it disappears as soon as you stop the machine, unlike the background radiation in nuclear reactions, which can last for a long time. Why is such a difference observed? Radiation exists in any object, but not in active state. Radiation background is a serpentarium with different types of toxic snakes biting all the tangles they interact with. The power of the radiation depends on the position of the radiation snakes in the linear sequence. During nuclear reactions, a strong radiation background appears since there are many tangles in which a radiation snake stands first. Interacting with other tangles, it changes their code. It pulls the radiation snakes in them to the first position while losing some of its own energy. Therefore, the farther away from the center of contamination, the weaker the radiation background. Meanwhile, during the operation of the electrostatic machine, short-lived radiation appears because when the tangles become untangled, radiation snakes that were not in the first place are released. Such single snakes biting another tangle very quickly lose their energy and transition into another state. That is, they quickly lose their toxicity. Radiation snakes can penetrate anywhere, but there are exceptions. For example, lead is good at shielding radiation because the viscosity and the density of its tangles are very high, so it's not easy to destroy them. Figuratively speaking, tangles of lead consist of small sticky snakes. Interacting with them, radiation snakes quickly lose their toxicity and power. It is important to note that the position of radiation snakes in a tangle determines the strength and durability of materials. The closer these snakes are to the beginning of the linear sequence, the stronger the interaction exhibited by the tangles they're part of. Of course, this is all a figurative comparison, simple associative examples to explain what happens at the beyond quantum level. And it gives an understanding of what processes actually occur during a nuclear reaction and what radiation is. Taking this hypothesis as a basis, it is up to scientists to discover this. Understanding the structure of the beyond quantum world, even such an associative level, already opens up possibilities that seemed science fictional not so long ago. Manipulating matter, creating material objects, using elementary particles, prolonging human life for at least 1,500 years, rejuvenating cells in the body, and completely revitalizing it at any stage. How will the technologies work that will allow us to do it all? The replicator and the health capsule. Replicator. In the created society, thanks to such technology as replicator, each person will have the opportunity to get everything necessary for life. A device the size of a microwave oven can be installed in every home. A household replicator. You can forget about the arduous chores, cooking, washing, dishwashing, and even buying many products. Because with a replicator, it will be possible to create anything out of elementary particles. How will it work? We can say that the replicator will manipulate particles, but in fact, it will manipulate what the particles are made of, that is, snakes. Moreover, in their linear state, each particle contains a few certain types of snakes, which have a strict sequence determined by the information embedded in them. Thus, by replacing one or several snakes or their sequence in a particle at the beyond quantum level, we can create a new particle, and thus a new material object. After all, the difference between a soccer ball and a hamburger is only in the characteristics of the snakes that make up their particles. This is a principle of how the replicator works. In order to create something from particles, we need particles themselves. Where can we get particles from? And in quantity to ensure the creation of different kinds of food and clothing for each person throughout their lives from the particle recycler. After all, if we know how to create objects out of the tiniest particles, we will know how to disassemble those objects. That's what the recycler will do. It will disassemble your dirty clothes, for example, or dirty dishes into particles. After disassembling the unwanted matter into particles, the recycler will pack them into a nano cartridge, which will then be used in the replicator to create new objects. Naturally, in the cartridge, the particles will be stored in a coiled state of snakes in the form of leptons and quarks. Since snakes in linear state cannot be held, they're constantly in motion, whereas in the form of particles, that is, in the coiled state, under special conditions, they can be stored in the cartridge without loss of properties and power infinitely long, up to billions of years. What size should this cartridge be to store such a large number of required particles? About 1 million nano cartridges can be placed in one human hair. 1 centimeter of nano cartridge can contain about 10 to the 36 quarks. So, 1 centimeter of human hair can store as many particles as to create a great number of material objects about the volume of an entire city. Thus, a cartridge the size of a human hair is able to serve a person for a lifetime and much longer. It seems incredible that such a small size can hold large volumes. In a cartridge, particles will be stored in a compressed, compact manner, not interacting with each other. While there are enormous distances between the particles that make up material objects, the distances between elementary particles in the microworld are similar to the distances between stars and galaxies in the universe. And the reason for this fractality is in the beyond quantum world. Having this knowledge, we will rethink the value of different materials. For example, the same plastic that we simply throw away today will become the most valuable material. Why? Because the tangles of hydrocarbons contain the largest number of different snakes, 33 types, from which you can create a lot of combinations, gold, hamburgers, and so on. For the same reason, cotton will also be valued because it is close in characteristics to plastic and many other particles can be created from it. To understand the process of replication better, we'll give you a figurative example. Imagine that we put knitted jumper into a device similar to a microwave oven. At that time, a special device reads the shape of the jumper and the position of each hair in the threads of the jumper. A special device, like a crochet hook, is then used to pick up one thread and unravel the jumper all the way down to the hairs, and each hair is disassembled into its component parts. All these components are stored compactly and tightly packed. Thus, our seemingly large jumper fits into a small box. When we need to make a jumper again, the previously recorded program reconstructs the hair components in their right sequence and converts them into wool strands, which are then converted into the yarn that will knit the jumper anew. All this information gives the understanding that everything in this world has been programmed and created. It's a whole programming table, but there's nothing complicated about it. Now in programming, we only use zeros and ones, whereas in the beyond quantum world, we use several hundred combinations. By comparison, our alphabet has only about 30 letters, but over 1 million words are made up of them. It is not difficult for a human to manipulate letters and form words, nor is it difficult for an artificial intelligence to analyze all the possible combinations of snakes, which can be quite numerous, and to analyze the characteristics of any material object at the snake level, and thus recreate its exact copy according to this information matrix. Health capsule. The health capsule works on the same principle. It will keep the human body in a perfect and young state for at least 1500 years. By means of the same manipulation of energies, the snakes that make up all the particles in the cells of our body. From the perspective of modern healthcare, the only way to help a person whose organ, for example, has failed is transplantation. The organ has to be taken out and replaced. Meanwhile, the health capsule will restore the working organ inside the body simply by changing the states of its cells at the beyond quantum level. There are about 30 trillion cells in the human body. In its complexity, each of them is like a galaxy. If we zoom into a cell 8 billion times and look inside, we will see that it resembles a colossal automated factory, performing almost as many unique functions as all manufacturing in the world. Moreover, this factory would possess a characteristic that none of the most modern machines have: the ability to reproduce its own structure in its entirety in a matter of hours. A cell is such an interconnected and fine-tuned system that if even one of its components fails, the cell will die. Therefore, manipulation of a living cell at the level of molecules and atoms is impossible. It's like trying to fix the engine of the car at a full throttle. Meanwhile, at the beyond quantum level, everything is simple. It is necessary to add snakes where they're missing or remove the excess ones, and the condition of an organ will return from pathological to healthy. Rejuvenation of the body and prolongation of human life will take place according to the same principle. Information code. We can make an analogy with the program code of a website. In order to change something on a web page, we don't make changes on the website itself, but we go into the code and write what we want. For example, we change the font color in the code, and this is immediately displayed on the website itself. We can write a different picture address, and the picture that we see on the website will be replaced. That is, we make the changes in the code, and they are displayed on the page of the website. This is how the health capsule will work. We make changes at the beyond quantum level, at the code level, and they're displayed here in the world that is visible to us. The knowledge about the control and manipulation of matter has been known since antiquity. That very caduceus symbol is a symbol of human power over matter, not a human over a human, as it was later distorted. Our hypothesis confirms that alchemy is not a fairy tale because it is possible to change one state of an object into another by simply changing its characteristics at the beyond quantum level. Also, our hypothesis gives an understanding on what principles the exchange of information between entangled particles takes place, which means that the same principle can be used by humankind and technologies. All this is available already at the first level of civilization development. And we become a civilization when we enter the created society. From that moment, completely new technologies based on the understanding of the beyond quantum world will be available to us. What technologies open up before us? Today's technological development is hindered by the limited speed of information transfer. But using the principle of instant interconnection of entangled particles removes any limitations. We cannot even imagine the amount of information which all matter in the universe exchanges every moment. We, humanity, only need to fit harmoniously into this flow. And then our lives will change tremendously. How exactly? Information exchange. First, the internet. The speed of information transfer will increase billions of times. Across the entire planet, data exchange will be instantaneous without loss of time, no longer requiring satellites, TV towers, or wires. In just a few years, an ordinary wristwatch will be able to process millions of times more information than the most advanced supercomputer nowadays. Compared to the future technology, today, we're like primitive tribes, transmitting signals using smoke from campfires. This also reveals enormous opportunities in human communication, instant connection, and communication in the form of the most realistic holograms, simulating the full presence of a person. Being thousands of kilometers away, we can see each other and communicate as if we were in the same room, or we can without leaving home, be at the seashore or on a fishing trip, experiencing all the sensations. The Eye of God, Vajra. Secondly, guided by the hypothesis presented, humanity will be able to use not 6 but all 32 types of energy as in ancient times. This means that such legendary technologies of ancient times, which we have already mentioned, Vajra and the Eye of God, will become available to us. How do they function? And what opportunities do they open? The Eye of God makes it possible to see and identify a person by their individual neural signal, no matter where they are, while Vajra allows us to remotely influence the operation of neurons. In essence, these are two components of a single technology that work with brain neurons in the human body as a whole. Neurons, during their work, produce a certain radiation, a signal which is yet unknown to science and which is unique for every person, like a fingerprint or a retina. This is a kind of individual neurocode that remains the same from birth throughout life. The kind of energy that Eye of God and Vajra operate with is impossible to shield. Those are signals that instantly reach each other across all galaxies, and the same kind of signals are perceived and emitted by the neurons of the brain, which has already been experimentally proven. This gives the understanding of why we actually need so many neurons and what their true function is. The Eye of God and Vajra technologies, introduced already in the transition period to the created society, opens up many prospects for us. How will they improve our lives? Safety. Thanks to the Eye of God technology, not a single person in the world will go missing or be kidnapped without a trace. Today, millions of children disappear without a trace every year, and the Eye of God is able to locate any person anywhere, anytime, no matter whether they're in a cave or in outer space. Moreover, thanks to the Eye of God and Vajra technologies, any crime will become impossible. A person intending to commit an unlawful act will be instantly identified and immediately held accountable. It's important to note that Vajra cannot read thoughts, but it can read emotions such as fear or aggression. For example, if aggression is recorded in a group of people and a person close to them experiences fear and the threat of violence, it is evident that this person is in danger and needs help. Immediately, the appropriate measures are taken to ensure that person's safety. all manifestations of aggression will be under control, so your life will always be completely safe. Also, in the created society, these technologies will be synchronized with the NPC Vuskud, which will be able not only see any perpetrator, but also to identify who they're connected with, see their financial flows, and make decisions to neutralize them. The Eye of God and Vajra will also help in case of emergencies. If a person is in trouble, catastrophe, or injured, suppose there is a major earthquake and many people are trapped under rubble. The Eye of God technology will instantly indicate exactly where a living person is, whereas Vajra technology can remotely make changes to their body that will allow them to survive. For example, by interacting with a person's neurons, Vajra will instantly stop their bleeding, eliminate the painful shock, and if necessary, put them into an artificial controlled coma. As processes in the body slow down in a coma, rescuers have more time to get to a person and save them. By the same principle, in case of an accident, Vajra will help a person before the ambulance arrives. And these are just a few striking examples of the use of these technologies to ensure people's safety. There will be no more accidents on the road due to drunk driving. Vajra technology will simply not allow a person under the influence of alcohol or drugs to get behind the wheel.
A few months ago, I promised to demonstrate a working prototype of the Eye of God system. I was obliged to keep my word. The only point we discussed was the security issue. Fortunately, we were helped by chance and we took advantage of the opportunity. Lately, most of the world's leading states have been developing global human monitoring and identification systems. To date, the best results have been achieved by Chinese specialists. Their facial recognition system that works with video surveillance based on Beidou 3 satellites, as well as the developments of such companies as SenseTime, LC Vision Technology, and others, actually shows quite good results. Chinese experts claim that their system is even capable of identifying a person wearing a balaclava. Well, this is partly true, but there's a nuance. The thing is that their system is able to identify a person wearing a balaclava only provided this person has been identified before, meaning his data is already in the system database. It means that if the person has never been exposed to the system, it is not able to identify him. Or here's another example. We take a person, put a pot on his head, and the Chinese system will not be able to identify him. Or we put a sack on his body, and the Chinese system will not be able to identify him either. The prototype of the Eye of God system we are demonstrating is completely different from any existing system. It works on completely different physical principles. And it doesn't use human anthropometry to identify a person. It uses the signal imprint of brain neurons. And that signal is unique. It is as unique as our fingerprints, our retina, or our DNA. It cannot be changed. It cannot be shielded. And we've proven that through a number of experiments. The prototype that we are demonstrating to you today actually works within a certain range. That is, horizontally, the scanning angle is 135 degrees. Vertically, it is 10 degrees. The scanning depth is 150 kilometers. These figures are confirmed experimentally. The scanning, or rather, the result of the scanning does not depend on the landscape at all. Look at the screen. The white dots you see are the people who are in the scanning cone of our prototype. Let me remind you that we are in Switzerland, and this is not the most densely populated country on the planet. Plus, we have mountains behind us. So, the population density here is quite low. So, if we were to hold this presentation somewhere, let's say in Tokyo or, for example, in Beijing, of course, the result would be completely different. Also, I think you noticed the linearity of the signal reflection, which is merely a result of the vertical fan-like operation of the prototype. What does this mean? It means that our prototype is unidirectional and unilinear. In other words, there is a constant vertical scanning. This is why there is a 0.3 second delay. Naturally, the working machine will be devoid of these, so to say, imperfections, which means that its operating range and functionality will be much more powerful and much larger. Thus, when the development is complete, the system will not only be able to identify all living people on planet Earth, but it will also be able to determine in real time the location of a person anywhere on the planet. It doesn't matter if he is on the surface, at any altitude above the surface of the planet, or he is under the ground or underwater. Nothing will limit the eye of God. Well, let's draw the parallels we already voiced. For example, we can take a person, put a pot on his head, and the eye of God will see and identify him. We can put a sack on a person, and the eye of God will see and identify him. We can even take a person, give him plastic surgery, and completely change his appearance. Or we can even, pardon me, do surgery to change his gender. Still, nothing will confuse the eye of God. It will accurately recognize the person by verifying their true identity. Talking about the work of our prototype and the fact that its functionality is somewhat narrower than the future working machine. Still, we can place it in the center of a large city. Let's say Abu Dhabi, for example. So, being in the center of Abu Dhabi, this prototype will not only be able to identify all the residents and visitors of the capital of the United Arab Emirates, but it will also control the territory within a radius of 150 kilometers. This means that it will also cover cities such as Dubai and Sharjah. If we talk about the future, about a working device, it will have to work, or let's say it can work together with existing satellite systems such as GLONASS, GPS, Galileo, or the Beidou 3, which we have already mentioned. At the same time, it can be combined with all the existing databases, and it can be combined with video surveillance systems. Thus, the system will not only identify a person and determine their location, but it will also permanently record a data file on each person. We would also like to draw your attention to the screen. Now, you can see how the system works when connected to video surveillance. And this is how it works without being connected to it. Here's an interesting fact for thinking people. Our prototype consumes 2.8 volts when receiving a signal. It only needs 1.2 volts to send an outgoing signal. Just think about it. 1.2 volts, which can change the world.
Health and Medicare. Vajra opens up tremendous possibilities for maintaining our health as well. For example, a person may not even realize that he has a pre-infarction angina, while Vajra can already detect this through his neural radiation, and emergency assistance will already be on its way. Anesthesia during surgeries will no longer be necessary, nor will any painkillers. Vajra will be able to anesthetize a person for any length of time, no matter how complex the surgery is. Drug-induced pain relief always has negative effects on the body, but thanks to Vajra, everything will be solved with just one click of a button without any side effects, thanks to the targeted impact on the neural group. In essence, the Eye of God and Vajra are a new level of care for human safety and health. Some people may have concerns like, what about private life while a neighbor is away? And if someone visits the neighbor's wife, is this technology going to record all of this too? The answer is simple. All of this is your personal business. Technology is not responsible for that. If there is no violence, fear, or threat to life, then it is not within the sphere of Vajra functioning. This technology does not monitor who came to visit whom and why, but it is obliged to monitor the fact that you have a pre-infarction or pre-stroke condition. Yes, some people might argue, will everyone be under control or what? It is now in the consumerist format that all people are under control. Today, even our own iron is watching us. All our gadgets, smartphones, laptops, all of this is used to collect as much information about us as possible, to control us, to profit from us, and to gain more power over us. Whereas in the creative society, you are the power. Just like every human being, your safety and your life are the top priority. The Eye of God technology is a guarantee of your safety, and most importantly, it is a guarantee that under no circumstances will the power belonging to all humanity be usurped by anyone. Nowadays, there is no more terrifying beast on the planet Earth than a human. Sharks kill an average of 10 people a year. Crocodiles kill 1,000 people a year, whereas one human today is capable of killing hundreds of thousands of people per year. Now, the Eye of God and Vajra technologies will make it possible to identify even those who stand behind people who give such orders and eliminate the entire chain. The Eye of God and Vajra technologies in the creative society are the main guarantee that no one will be able to impose their will on people. Power will never be taken away from humanity under any circumstances. If the Eye of God and Vajra technologies are used in the creative society, where human life is a top priority, they would serve for the benefit of people. But if these same technologies are used in the consumerist format, where human life is worth nothing, this will inevitably lead to a global totalitarian regime. Why? Because a state, a company, or a person who possesses this technology, with a push of a button, or even with a mental order, will be able to give a command to destroy all armies of the world, no matter whether it is one object or billions of people. And the scariest part is that no one will be able to resist that, because these technologies work in energies which cannot be shielded. It is simply impossible to hide from them, just as it is impossible to determine where these signals are coming from. The introduction of such technology in the consumerist format is highly undesirable, because it will be fatal for everyone. It will lead us to a planet-wide enslavement, where one person or a group of people dictates their will to everyone. Why have we made a decision to announce these technologies and our hypothesis now? There are two reasons for this. Firstly, because we fully understood the phenomena we encountered while conducting experiments in the pyramid device only over time. When we understood that by using those energies, it is possible to recreate technologies such as the Vajra and the Eye of God, we realized the entire severity of the situation. At the initial stages of our experiments, a wide circle of people were involved, so the information went beyond the original group of participants and became available to many. We understand that this knowledge is of great interest and encourages people to research. According to our data, some countries are already working in this direction today, which means that sooner or later, one of the countries will own such a device. That's why we're talking openly now. If now, in the consumerist format, these technologies fall into irresponsible hands, it will be extremely dangerous. The second reason why we're now voicing this hypothesis is because humanity's most important task today is to survive the cycle of climate disasters. The climate Cerberus does not use the internet, and even Vajra and the Eye of God cannot stop it. Today, the Earth's core is being affected by the impact from the space, which causes cataclysms every 12,000 years. The proposed hypothesis gives us an opportunity to understand what kind of energy affects the core and what are the principles of its impact. By studying this energy at the beyond quantum level, humanity will be able not only to neutralize its negative impact on our planet, but also to use it as a source of additional energy for the benefit of humankind. This can only be achieved if the world's best scientists are able to unite their efforts and focus precisely on solving this problem. This is possible only in the creative format of society. For this to become our reality, we as humanity must make a request to change the format from the consumerist to the creative one. This requires active participation of every member of society, and I would like to address the representatives of the scientific world. The hypothesis you have just heard is just information to ordinary people, but for you, it's a real chance to save all humanity.